It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out all of our other wonderful links in the description on the Linktree. This week's episode, the Clarenville UFO Sighting. This is a pretty fun one, happened all the way back in 1978. This topic was chosen by our Discord, by our Patreon supporters who voted. Every week they get to vote for the upcoming topic. And this one was going up against the Bernie Madoff scandal, which they chose the UFO over the conspiracy. So, that's how it usually goes. We'll see. We'll get Agent Ether wants to do a lot more conspiracies because we do mostly UFOs, I guess. But whatever, we'll work some in there. There's 3 tiers on Patreon. We have the lower tier that gets you early access and after hours, the medium tier that gets you bonus episodes, and the top tier that lets you vote on upcoming episodes. And I just noticed on the website, by the way, if you're not sure and you want to check out what kind of stuff we have on there, most of the things on there should have audio previews if you just want to go look at the page and take a gander at what sorts of bonus contents that we have on there. All right, now let's get to the Clarenville UFO sighting. This is a good one, and it's surprising that this is not a more prominent case, given how good the evidence is and the number of witnesses involved. But this one, there's not really a whole lot to it. If you do a search, you're going to find very few blogs and websites covering it. Even though there's such good evidence, almost nobody talks about this thing. And I guess maybe part of that is it's happened a long time ago, but there are plenty of sightings that happened a long time ago that people are still talking about. So I'm not sure what it is about this one. Might go back to my theory that there's not really anything controversial about it. It happened. We have a bunch of witnesses that said they saw something, and that's pretty much the end of it. You can't really argue with them and say that, they're all lying or it's a hoax or anything like that. But it also doesn't have anything like, alien bodies or anything like that. So maybe it's just a little less controversial. So that's why it's not talked about as often as some other cases.
But Canada did mint a coin about this UFO experience, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. This is,
one of those.
I think this is the last one. I think we've done all the coins now after this one.
Oh, nice.
There's this one. There's the Yukon Encounter. There's Falcon Lake. There's the Montreal UFO, and then what's the last one? I don't know. I forget the last one, but I think we've done, after this, we will have done all of the 5 coins that they have for that. They also have a couple of coins for like ghost encounters and stuff as well, but they have 5 UFOs.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
I'd like to see some of those. Like those are like they're like what's commonly referred to as like a challenge coin, right? Like it's not like a small little coin. It's like a larger one, right?
Right.
From what I understand.
Yeah, they're different shapes and sizes. I think the Falcon Lake one is kind of like an oval, kind of looks like egg shaped, and then some of the other ones are sort of like rectangular shaped, and they are silver, $20 silver coins, but they sell for a lot more than that, like $130 or $140.
Yeah,
and they have limited runs of, depending on the coin, 5,000 or fewer coins. Which sounds like a lot, but if you consider that they sell these things pretty much worldwide to collectors, 5,000 is really not that many. We actually got a couple of them. I think we got the Yukon one and the Montreal one, because those are the only ones I could find for a reasonable price. The other ones are, especially the Falcon Lake one. That was the first one they came out with, and that one's like, it's over $1,000. So I'm like,
oh crap.
I would like to have it, but I don't have $1,000 to be spending on a stupid coin.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also, I think that they will hold their value reasonably well. I'm not convinced that they will go up in value terribly a lot, but in today's day and age of basically hyperinflation, you kind of don't want to hold all of your money in cash. You want to trade it for assets, because cash is going down. It's burning in flames. All right, well, let's get to the case. This happened on October 26, 1978, and just before Halloween, so that's kind of creepy, I guess. I don't know. Witnesses on Main Drive in Clarenville, which is in Newfoundland, in the Newfoundland area, or the Labrador area. I'm not sure which. I forget. I put both of those on there, and I don't know if that's like the city and the region, but it's on the east part of Canada, like towards the very, very east of Canada. So it's on that part, like way over there. Is that Nova Scotia? I think it's Nova Scotia over there. But anyways, so witnesses on Main Drive, there was a husband and wife called the police at about 2 a.m. And RCMP sent James Blackwood, who was 25 years old at the time, to go check it out. And he said on the way he wasn't really expecting anything too exciting, maybe some people who were just drunk or something. But it turns out this married couple, this was actually their second sighting within a short period of time. And I'll talk about the second one later on. So they called, and by the time the cop got there, there was already the descriptions of the number of witnesses are a little fuzzy. Some witnesses say about it, or some accounts say about a dozen. Some accounts say several dozen. But the government, the Canadian government and the police, especially during interviews and stuff, James Blackwood went on to do interviews, they didn't release any names of these witnesses at the time. So it's a little hard to say how many people were there exactly, but given that this thing was there for a while, I think it's safe to say that the witnesses, there were probably dozens of witnesses, if not more, that saw this thing in a very large region. But so what happened? So this was a brightly lit object in the sky that at first was moving east at about 2,000 to 3,000 feet altitude, or 500 feet, depending on which witness you talk to. And at first, the James Blackwood, the RCMP officer, thought that it might be like a jet because it was, kind of far away, and it was just moving along like you might expect a jet to. The couple that was originally called the police was watching it. They had binoculars that they also shared with other people there, including James Blackwood, and they were able to view this thing, kind of zoomed in through the binoculars. And what they saw was an object that was oval or cigar shaped, and it had a fin tail that was sort of a stubby triangle, it was described as. It didn't make any noise, and it was described as being by Officer Blackwood, was described as being the size of a Boeing 737. Now, they've made many models of 737s, but we're talking somewhere in the ballpark of probably 100 to 120 feet long, 100 to 110 foot wingspan, and about 35, 40 foot height. Or that's the basic dimensions of a 737. So that's what he thought it looked like, about that size. The object had blue flashing lights. It was metallic, and there were no windows, doors, or openings of any kind. So very similar to other UFO sightings, there's no flight control surfaces. And they said, the officer said that the little triangle thing didn't look like it was like the little triangle fin, because Officer Blackwood was an aviation enthusiast, and he was very familiar with a lot of different planes. So he was familiar with how planes work. So he said that it didn't look like that little fin tail thing was anything that could help control the craft. So who knows what it was, but it was sticking up off there, but there's no wings or anything else sticking off of the craft.
Yeah, and, I think one of the other statements that he made also was kind of pretty important, in a way, I suppose. But like the metal on the object or the craft, he said it was not like normal metal. It wasn't shiny. It was very dull, not shiny at all. It wasn't smooth. It looked like it was like very coarse looking from what he said, which I actually. That statement kind of stands out to me because that's a very specific thing to mention, Right.
Yeah. And that's when he was looking at it through the telescope. But yeah, I think I have a direct quote from that a little later on. But that description is really interesting because it does not sound like something terrestrial. That's for sure.
Yeah, and and like this whole thing kind of strikes me as a very odd situation. And to have like a UFO or whatever it was just sitting there like in plain view for presumably hours, right? And you're just like sitting there, like what kind of an experience would that have been for anybody? That sounds crazy. Like you're sitting there, the thing ain't moving. It's just like out there, like just presenting itself, like it wants to be seen almost.
Right.
And it's like I would kind of freak out a little bit, like what the hell, what the holy hell? This thing is just sitting there, like, and like it sounds like a crazy experience because like you're seeing this, like from what they say, it obviously looked like a UFO or definitely not an aircraft, and obviously an aircraft or a helicopter. If a helicopter was out there, you would be able to hear like the helicopter, right? I don't see why not, and even like some of those like stealth helicopters, they still make noise, and also like when you see a helicopter, it's obvious it's a helicopter, you know what I mean? You're not going to look at it and be like, oh, that's a UFO or, I freaking, that doesn't make any sense, but what a weird experience, just for that thing just to be sitting there in plain sight and just like, obviously whatever it was, it didn't care about being seen, is what I'm saying.
Right. And it gets weirder because the officer flashed the lights on his car. I think, what do they call them? The wigwags. he flashed his wigwags, and the UFO mimicked the lights. It flashed back at, it flashed its lights like in the same rhythm or whatever that the officer was flashing his lights.
Yeah,
So
that's not too strange. I've been known to flash my wigwags from time to time.
yeah, who doesn't, while doing the whirly bird, I might add,
Yeah, get a couple of drinks in me, you're guaranteed to see something like that.
Oh yeah, I've seen it. And it is a beautiful sight.
All right.
Yeah, let's he wears tassels, people, okay? I'm just going to say that. Yeah. All right. So, one of the witnesses there, the couple who originally called asked the officer when he flashed his lights, they said, "What are you doing?" The officer said he was trying to make contact. And then Chester, as the guy's name, he said he didn't want to make contact, so he peaced out. He's like, "Nope, I am out of here. This is enough UFO for me." So him and his wife left.
Sounds pretty reasonable.
Now, the officer went to the detachment office, which he didn't say, at least in the interviews I saw, he didn't say exactly how far away that was, but I got the impression that it was pretty close, like probably less than a 5-minute drive. He went to the detachment office and got a telescope that I guess they used to look for drug smugglers on the water, I guess. He came back with that, and it was a lot more powerful than the binoculars. And by the time he got back, the object had stopped moving and was hovering above the water near Random Island. And I'm not just saying Random Island as if I don't know the name of the island. Apparently, the name of the island was Random Island.
I know, that's weird.
Yeah. Well, I have a theory for that. So Tales told that the Canadians up there love them some beer, and whoever was in charge of naming stuff was probably pretty drunk, and he just ran out of steam, and he had another island to name. And somebody said, "Okay, well, what do we name this one?" I don't know, Random Island, and then just passed out or something. I don't know. Why else would you name it Random Island? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Yeah.
There's another island I'll talk about later on if we get to it that's also, or a lake, I think. No, it was a lake that has a unusual name that I thought it might be a typo. I'm like, that's a weird name for a lake. But anyways, through the telescope, he got a better look at the object, and he saw that there were blue flashing lights on either side. There was a red light on the top middle of the object as well. And I guess that was like at a lower magnification on the telescope, but he zoomed in even further to 60 times magnification, and the object fully filled the scope. He said that the bottom half of the object was completely illuminated. He said it looked like a source of light, not a reflection. And when he zoomed in, he could see that the blue light looked like it was flashing very, very rapidly. And while he was watching it, the object rotated or turned around. When he zoomed in on the red light at the top of the object, he said it looked like it was alternating red and white, and it was flashing very, very rapidly. And he said he'd never seen a light flashing that rapidly before. and compared it to, I don't think he said strobe light, but I think, what did he say? He said it was sort of like if you go to a concert or something and they have flashing lights, and it felt disorienting like that does, like when you go to a concert. So I thought, okay, it's a disorienting flashing light. That's kind of strange. But I think the reason why he focused on that distinction was because a lot of airplanes, or pretty much all airplanes, do have flashing lights. So it seems like he's trying to say that, no, this was not an airplane light. It was flashing much, much faster than you would see on an airplane light.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, go ahead, ETA.
Well, no, I just agree. Yeah, the lights on an airplane, yeah, they do flash, but very slowly, and very intentionally, I guess you'd say. It's when you see the lights on an airplane, like it's very obvious that, well, that's an airplane.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't flash. They don't flash in a way that will give you seizures or something. You know what I mean?
Or they don't cause disorientation, at least not that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Yeah,
very strange detail. So he looked at the tail under the telescope, and he described it as a triangular-shaped tail. He said it was small and stubby. The object stayed for about an hour and a half, turned side to side, and then before it left, it started to move a little bit. It moved up and down, sideways, back and forth, and, just kind of moving around. And he said that when it moved rapidly. Like it was, it would go, it'd be in one spot and then it would move up or down like real quick, almost like you couldn't see it or something. Like it was just here and then it was there. Like it was moving really quickly, but then it would always snap back to where it came from. And we've heard about this in a couple of other cases that we've talked about on this show before. That's a very, very interesting detail because it matches some other UFO sightings that we've talked about. So whenever you see these commonalities, to me, it supports the idea that there's something out there. It makes, when you have these independent witnesses describing similar movements of these ships, it kind of makes you think, well, maybe they are seeing something out of this world,
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like with that description, it kind of sounds like the craft was like teleporting back and forth within a small area,
Yeah.
And like that definitely does not describe the movement of any aircraft that I know of that, humans have made.
Yeah, and it made me wonder if, so this happened right before it disappeared, and when it disappeared, it rose straight up slowly for a little bit, and then it just shot off like a meteor, just boom, it was gone.
Uh-huh.
And I wonder if this was the ship starting up its, it's powering up its engine ready to leave, and if it's using something that can manipulate space and time, or something that operates in another dimension that we're not aware of, then maybe
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes. Maybe it causes the ship to look like it's moving around like this, but it wasn't really moving. It was in the same place and it was just firing up its motor, getting ready to shoot off, Because anything, even a craft like a drone that's not manned by a biological entity of some kind, if it went that quickly and it was subject to the laws of inertia, it would tear itself apart with the forces. Just the air friction alone, let alone the G-forces, would rip any craft apart moving that quickly. So it suggests that these, whatever these ships are or these craft, whatever they are, they're not subject to the same laws of physics that we are. They've discovered ways around that, and as they would have to, if they were traveling from far away, there's no way you're going to get from here to there. Even at the speed of light, it can take an incredibly long time depending on where you're going. So it would make sense if they had developed some really interesting stuff.
Yeah, or like what you're mentioning there, like if they existed on a different plane of reality, like a dimensional whatever, like if they're coming from a different dimension, who knows what that would look like to us, right?
Right.
So maybe that could be possible that that's a byproduct of that type of a thing, So who knows? But it's definitely a very odd situation.
Yeah, it's pretty strange, and we don't have anything that can just hover there and then just sort of zip around like that and then shoot off. Like there's nothing that I know of, that I've ever heard of that can do anything remotely like that. We have aircraft that can hover. We have jets that can hover. For example, the good old Harrier that can hover, but it can't do what this thing did.
Uh-huh.
So here's a quote that the officer said about the scope, just for fun. I took down some of his quotes here about what he said because he did a lot of interviews. Anybody interested, you can probably find tons of interviews of this guy. I found one on YouTube, and there's also some from newspapers that I found, but you can see what he said. So here's one of his quotes. He said, "Chester had binoculars, but this thing was a lot better with 60 times magnification. I got to see it close up. It didn't come any closer to us, and as it started to leave, it went up slow, taking forever to rise. Then vroom, gone like a shooting star." So that's in his own words what he saw. And he says, I'm familiar with aircrafts of all shapes and sizes, but the metal on it was not like aircraft metal. It was very dull and not shiny at all. It wasn't even smooth. It was very coarse looking. The technology was way beyond what we had then and still way beyond what we have now. So he's not saying necessarily it was aliens, but he's not saying it either. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
Nudge, nudge. One of the things that I find really kind of crazy about this situation too is like from Blackwood's own words, like he didn't really want to talk too much about it, but he was actually, from what I understand, he was ordered by his like superiors to actually like give all the interviews he could. And like he was actually on the clock being paid like just to give interviews about this situation.
Yeah.
Like I find that to be kind of weird, like,
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Why would they want him to talk more about this? I would think like, for the most part, they'd want to just kind of, shove it under the rug and get rid of it, like
Right.
why talk about it,
Well, and why does the police force have, budget to pay somebody to basically talk to people on the phone for 2 weeks? Because that's what he said.
Yeah.
At first,
what's the benefit?
Yeah. At first, he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to give interviews because he knew that he was going to catch shit from the other officers. And if you ever hung out with any police officers, they tend to be, I don't know, more of a blue collar crowd. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna get your balls busted for sure. You will get your balls busted if you're hanging out with law enforcement. That's a fact.
A lot of times,
I don't care if you're in Canada, America, Europe, whatever. I think that's a universal fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said that he didn't want to give any interviews, but they ordered him. His superiors from St. John's, that's the capital of the area, they called and they said they want him to take any and all interview requests. And like you were saying, you have to wonder why. Why would they want that? It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I look at like, what's the motive, right? Like, why would they want that to happen? I mean, there must have been some importance there for them. I can't see it. I don't know, but it's just weird. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, it's weird. So he has another quote here that I found really, really interesting. He said, "We didn't see the thing after that, but we did have a lot of calls prior to that." So suggesting that a lot of people were calling not just that night, but in previous nights as well. And I'll get to some other cases at the end here, after we talk about this one. I found some FOIA released documents, like police documents and whatnot, of Canadian UFO reports, and there's some pretty cool stuff in there. Okay, so he said, but we did have a lot of calls prior to that. At that particular time, there was a flight from Jordan heading to Toronto that happened to see it, and it was picked up by radar and Gander. It was a big issue at the time. So they got this UFO on radar, and it was seen from an airplane. Panini Party says, maybe it was a joke. They were like, man, this guy keeps talking about his UFO. Let's make him talk to the press. No, but he didn't. He didn't want to talk to anybody about it because he knew that his fellow officers were going to give him crap. He specifically said that. He didn't want to talk to anybody about it. He was very closed-lipped about it. But maybe they were just trolling him. Maybe they had a prankster higher up in the division. They're like, all right, he saw a UFO, huh? Well, how would you like 2 weeks vacation, buddy?
Yeah. I think you need some mental health time.
Yeah, some mental health time. Why don't you talk to the newspapers, pal? Give some interviews, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
So after he started talking to the press, he received lots of media attention and, of course, got a lot of shit from fellow officers making like Mork and Mindy jokes and that kind of thing. But, that's of course was to be expected, I suppose, even these days. depending on your line of work, you probably are going to get ribbed by people you work with. But he did a lot of interviews, and the story went national and a little, to a small extent, international, but not as much as many other UFO cases. It didn't really hit, at least as far as I could find, it didn't really hit the international press that hard, but it did hit the national press, and it had an impact on the local area. So Clarenville started doing like UFO features at their businesses and having events and things like that were themed around it, as often happens with these sorts of, things. And I think part of the reason they did that is because I think many people in the area saw the UFO. Unfortunately, unlike some of the other cases we've talked to, there was no investigator, at least not that I could find, that went and canvassed the area. Sometimes you'll have UFO investigators will go to the town, they'll knock on doors, they'll go to the local watering hole, and they'll talk to people.
Yeah.
They'll ask people, did you see it? Did you see it? What was your story? Can I take your story down for the record? But nobody did that in this case, so we don't know how many locals saw it.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing the number is extensive.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have to agree with that. It makes perfect sense. How popular this story was and how accepted, like people like for example, there was a hockey team that changed their name in the area to the Clarenville UFOs.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's just like for people to do that, to have all these they had like a local like hotels and stuff that had like UFO special events, or deals, and like for them to embrace this that much, there had to have been a ton of people that saw this, and also a lot of people in the area, because of how popular the story was, or how many people probably claim to have witnessed it. That's why it's so accepted and also embraced.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so there was a skeptical explanation offered for this one. Would you care to wager a guess there, Agent ETA?
Oh, let me think. What could it possibly be? Maybe Jupiter?
Yep, Jupiter. Yeah. It was Jupiter. And Jupiter is very bright in the night sky. It's really cool looking. If you have a telescope or, good binoculars, you can take a peek at it and you can see some pretty cool stuff. But it doesn't really make sense in this case. Blackwood actually spoke to that explanation specifically. He said, I tore a strip off him. He had this big explanation, but he didn't talk to me or talk to any of the other 12 witnesses. So I guess there's 12 witnesses where he was at the time. He just surmised this on his own. There was this guy doing a paper on it. I told him what I thought of him. How the hell can a planet cast a shadow on the water? How can it come down that close that it can block out random island? So he's talking about, I forgot to mention that earlier. Yeah, the object did cast a shadow on the water, So, so that was his explanation. And he was pretty unhappy with that being Jupiter. But if you look at what the witness actually says, and if you look at his drawing, and if you look at the fact that there are witness statements from other witnesses and what they said, well, I mean, it's not Jupiter. There's not a chance.
Yeah. And Blackwood actually, he made statements about that too, because that guy McNamara that was the one that gave this explanation that it was a planet Jupiter. He even said Blackwood said that he had this big explanation, but he didn't talk to any to him or any of the other witnesses that Blackwood knew of. He's just like, oh no, don't worry about it. No, it's Jupiter. Basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, so in a nutshell, I guess that's kind of the story. And unfortunately, we don't have a bunch of other witnesses and a bunch of other stories to tell. That's pretty much what happened. But there were a ton of other sightings that were very similar. Like I said, I found some Canada FOIA releases and I looked through them for similar sightings, and I found a bunch. I can't talk about all of them here because there just isn't enough time, but there's a ton. And I didn't even have a chance to look at Project Blue Book. Well, actually, Blue Book would have been closed by this time, but I didn't have a chance to look for United States sightings either. And I'm willing to bet that if I did look at sightings from the United States, I would find similar sightings as well. Because with these cases where you have people seeing things over a pretty wide area, generally you will find it in other places as well. But these reports tend to be locked to a particular region or country, and Canada and the United States don't necessarily communicate all that well with their particular UFO sightings. So I didn't look at the United States, but I'd be willing to bet I would find them. But anyways, we have a report here from Mr. and Mrs. Chester Lethbridge. Those are the married couple that called the police to begin with. And this one was at 3 a.m. on the 12th of October. And at first I thought it was a typo because it's a very similar sighting. In the report, the date is written as 78-10-12. So it's, in a different order than I would normally use it myself. I guess that maybe that's the standard for police reports back then. But according to this police report, they saw Mr. and Mrs. This is cute when you see these reports, and they from a certain time period, they call them, the witnesses, Mr. and Mrs. Chester Lethbridge. They don't do that anymore. That is no longer acceptable. But back then, it's a very old fashioned thing. Back then, they used to refer to married couples by the husband's name. Not okay these days.
And also referring to people by their actual name, is more thorough,
right?
So to be more specific, it's you might as well,
right? Yeah, exactly. So they lived on Marine Drive. These are not redacted, by the way. These reports have their phone numbers, their addresses, all kinds of good stuff. So, who knows? Maybe their kids are still living at their house and we can call them up and harass them. But anyways.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. But they had their binoculars and they were outside of their house. And so, by the way, this is, what is that? It's about, I don't know, a week and a half before the main sighting that we're talking about. So before they saw the main sighting we're talking about and they called the police, they had this sighting. They were outside the residence. There was a clear visibility in the sky, and they saw an object that was about 500 feet altitude that was hovering over Random Island. The object was circular. It looked to be 30 to 40 feet in diameter, and it had flashing red, yellow, and blue lights. The object didn't move. They didn't see any movement for the object. And the following morning at 5 a.m, Mrs. Lethbridge reported it to the Department of National Defense. And that's pretty much that. It's a very short summary in the file. It doesn't go over a lot of stuff. It just has a really quick summary of what they reported. But at first I thought it was a typo until I saw a reference to them having 2 sightings, and I realized this must be their first sighting that they had before they had their second sighting. So this thing was, if this was the same object, it was not being shy, and it was kicking around the area for a while.
Oh yeah. Like I said, it almost seems like this object or vehicle, whatever craft, whatever it was, it wanted to be seen.
Right. Yeah. And the report also mentions a C.H. Mercer, PTE. I'm guessing these are military designations. C.H. maybe that's chaplain. PTE might be private something or other. So Mercer, Stoltz, and Mr. W. Miles were on duty at the 226 radar squadron, and apparently they saw a similar object themselves. But again, they saw it for about 2 hours, and that's pretty much it. That's the summary that we have. But there are many, many other sightings, and let's talk about a couple of them because they are really weird and really interesting. So the next one I have is on the 11th of October, and way back in 1971, but I saw this in the files and it looks similar enough to where I wanted to talk about it, even though we're talking about 1978. Elizabeth Swan was driving at 7:30 p.m. and had a bunch of kids in her car on Highway 38 near Hodges Cove, Trinity Bay, and that's in Newfoundland. She was heading west towards the Trans-Canada Highway. Great album, by the way, by Boards of Canada, who are actually, I think, a Scottish band.
Huh.
Anyways, she saw a brilliant white light appear from a westerly direction, and that light was joined by a series of other lights, 6 to 8 of them, that had the same level of brightness as the first object. The secondary objects appeared in a diagonal line, And then after they went for a little while, they broke formation and started chasing each other at a high rate of speed. Now, we've seen reports that are similar to this, where objects will seem to circle around each other. That's common enough to where, it's sort of interesting. I've seen that several times in UFO reports. We've talked about it on this show before. They were in the area for about a minute, the objects were, and then they disappeared over the bay. She didn't hear any noise, and the objects appeared to be too low to be aircraft. So I guess there was like a cloud cover and it was raining. So she saw the objects below the cloud cover, and it was way too low. So close to the ground, the objects were close to the ground and too low to be aircraft, according to the report. Now, the report also says at the end, here's a quote, "It is felt by this investigator that the lights seen were reflections of headlights of oncoming vehicles, and due to the rain, wind, and etc., made them more pronounced than normally. No other explanation could be uncovered to clarify the lights, unless otherwise..."
Besides Jupiter.
Yeah, maybe Jupiter, Venus. Yeah. Could be undercovered to clarify the lights. Unless otherwise instructed, this file will remain as hereunder shown. So it's almost like, the police report, the cop is basically saying, the fuck am I supposed to do? I'm just,
Yeah. And most officers, they're not going to want to have to deal with this kind of stuff. They're just God damn it. I got one of these cases. Shit. I better just come up with something, They're probably more interested in stopping somebody from getting the crap beaten out of them, or somebody from getting their house burglarized. They don't probably want to spend their days investigating UFOs. And that's the impression I get from reading a lot of these police reports. Most of them have something like this in the report, where the cop is basically like, "Hey, fuck you guys." Hey, I'm not your guy, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm not your buddy, guy.
I'm not looking into these UFOs. Oh, I need to work my Canadian accent. I was trying to do one there, but
all my accents are horrible.
Yeah.
Atrocious.
It did. I was trying to bust one out, but it didn't work out. I need to practice that. But anyways, yeah, the cop is just not into it at all. That's the impression I get. All right. At 11:22 on October 30th, 1977. So now this is about a year prior to the Clarenville event. Mr. Upham of North River, or near North River.
Mr. what?
Upham, UPHAM is his name, apparently. Corporal Good and Truro RCMP, Kenneth Upham. Wait, that's what the report said. So I guess maybe Upham was from the RCMP. These witnesses saw an object that was shaped like a huge star, moving slowly, giving off a clear light. The light turned from being a clear light to flashing red, blue, and green colors, and they saw the object for about 2 to 3 hours. Now, again, this report doesn't have a whole lot of detail at all. It's basically just a list. It looks like something they filled out saying what they saw, but it sounds an awful lot like the Clarenville event, All right, now, here's closer to the event. Ronald Watkins saw an object on September 9th, 1978 at 3:50 in the morning. He was 20 kilometers south of Bowdoin, Alberta on Highway 2.
What the hell was this fella doing up at 3:50 in the freaking morning?
I know, right? Him and his wife, Cher Watkins, which
doing a bunch of meth.
That's an awesome name. We need to bring back Cher. I think that's a French name.
Is it? Well, I'm not too big of a fan
of do you believe in what's that song? Do you believe in life after love or whatever?
Something, I don't know. Is that about Sonny Bono?
I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of her music either, but the name's nice. Anyways, they saw a bright white saucer-like object that had small red lights, one light on each side, very similar to the Clarenville object, only the lights on the Clarenville object on the sides were blue. The object was 500 feet above the ground, and they witnessed it for about 10 to 15 minutes. They first saw it heading south at a high rate of speed. Watkins, that is Ronald Watkins, stopped his vehicle. When he did this, the object also stopped. When Watkins moved 5 feet to the north, the object appeared to move an eighth of a mile south, and the object stopped moving when they stopped. He repeated this several times until the object was about 1 mile from them. After this, they left, and after this, they left, and the object, when they left, the object left at lightning speed. They didn't hear any sound, and both the report says both parties were very tired when the sighting took place, and it is possible that the object was a stationary light. Again,
it's weird that the object was like mirroring like their movements and stuff. I would have started twerking or something to see if like what kind of response I can get out of that.
Yeah, right.
That'd be fun.
But the reason I included this one is it reminded me of the Clarenville object that reacted to the officer's headlights, or not headlights, wigwags. Such a stupid name. Wigwags. But it reminded me of that because the object was like interacting with the witness, at least it appeared to be. But who knows? All right. Next up, we have Linda Louise LaHeroux, L,Heureux. I think that would be LaHeroux, something like that. LaHeroux. Anyways, she had a sighting on October 29, 1978, so just a few days after the Clarenville sighting. She was driving a vehicle northbound on Main Access Road in Gorsard when she saw a curved-like wisp of lighted fog which began moving forward at quite a speed. It was 20 degrees up from the horizon. The wisp of light fog appeared to have broken away from the light, which was still for the time being, revealing a quarter moon shaped object. Now, this report, the way it's written, is not super clear. And a lot of these reports, I wonder if the officer who wrote them was perhaps a native French speaker, but was writing in English. That's their second language, because a lot of these reports have an awful lot of typos or misspelled words. So I wonder,
there's something lost in translation there.
Exactly. That's what I think, because this is a very bizarre description. But anyways, the wisp of light fog appeared to have broken away from the light, which was still, for the time being, revealing a quarter moon shaped object. The object grew into a full moon shape, and then moving out from behind it came red glowing disc with blue glowing center. We now have a wisp of fog shaped like a wedge, a moon-like disc, dull yellowish in color, and a red-blue centered disc. Then the whole issue moved forward very rapidly in a westerly direction, then stopped. Then the red disc shifted forward in a slow motion type of way, back into the moon disc. The disc had caught up to the definite shaped fog wisp. There also appeared at this time to be an exhaust trail behind it. The entire process was performed over again 2 times. The disc then disappeared, leaving behind the wedge-like wisp and an exhaust trail. The total duration of the sighting was 3 to 5 minutes. Now, the interesting thing is that she did not report this incident until she had a second sighting, along with her husband, which was, her husband's name is Arthur. And this sighting was not that long later, just a month later or a month and a half later, on the 13th of December, 1978. They were at their house and they saw an object between 5:50 in the morning and 9 o'clock in the morning. This object appeared above, this is the lake name I mentioned earlier, Lesser Slave Lake.
What? That's an odd name.
Yeah, remember I promised you guys an oddly named lake earlier in the episode, and there you go.
There must be some kind of meaning behind like, Random Island, like why it was called random. There has to be something there. Like,
right.
There's a reason why they named it that name. Because that's like, it's just I don't know. It's a random name,
Yeah.
Pun intended. Well, but like, it's just odd. Like why would you name it that? I don't get it, unless like there's another meaning to the word random than I know of,
Yeah. Well, hey, if anybody lives near Clarenville and they have any idea why that island is named Random Island, let us know. You know,
Well, it could very. I mean, I am no expert at all in language, but maybe there's a random means something in French than as opposed to in English. Maybe it means something else. I don't know. I
oh,
have no idea. But
yeah, that's actually a really good idea. That's true. Maybe,
maybe
yeah.
I don't know. This is just a guess. But
So we'd have to say Random Lake. You know,
yeah,
with
maybe
a French
maybe it's not even
accent.
pronounced. Maybe it's not even pronounced random. You know,
Yeah.
it's random or
Random?
fuck, I don't know.
But
I don't know.
Lesser Slave Lake. So a lesser lake, I could see that being if there was like two lakes next to each other and one of them was really big and one of them was smaller. Maybe the smaller one would be called Lesser Lake, but why would you call it Slave Lake? Maybe historically that's where slaves did stuff, but even so,
Maybe.
why would you
I
call
don't
it
know.
Slave Lake? I don't know. Most people don't celebrate that kind of a history, you know, by naming stuff
No.
after. I don't know. It's a really weird name. Maybe there are different meanings of slave. Slave can mean multiple things, not just people. So maybe it refers to some other definition of slave, you know? I don't know. Anyways,
Yeah.
the object was a large white light shining like a star, but bigger. Sound familiar? But this time it was triangular in shape and it pulsated like many of the other sightings had pulsating lights. It had a red like sparks or beams were emitting from the top point. The triangle would flare up and then go roundish. It appeared to be settling down in a swinging type motion. Settling down in a swinging type motion. I don't know what that means, but it sounds weird.
Huh.
Now, the wife went in to grab the husband, and she lost sight of it, obviously, when she did that. When they returned, it had risen 45 degrees in the sky, suggesting it started lower on the horizon, getting smaller. As it did, there was a fog or haze around it. They watched it through binoculars and saw that it was a solid object that looked like molten steel. Molten steel. They watched
Interesting.
it. Yeah, they watched it until 8:45 or so, and it started leaving at that time. And by 9 o'clock, it was gone. So that's a couple of kind of bizarre sightings that happened around the same time as as the Clarenville sighting. All right. Next up, November 14th, 1978. A couple weeks later after Clarenville, 4 witnesses saw an object with 2 blue flashing lights on its bottom. And the cool thing about this one, I'm not going to read all 4 witness statements, but all 4 witnesses there are typed statements. I don't know how they were taken exactly, but you can read the 4 different statements in the file. They all describe the same thing from slightly different perspectives. They were all in the car, and it's just really interesting to read through that and see how they all describe it, because they all say slightly different versions of it, which is really interesting to me, but they all describe the same thing. But the basic idea is that they saw an object with 2 blue flashing lights on its bottom, and it was heading northwest. The driver chased it in the car towards the Centennial Center, and I'm not familiar with the area, so I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing it's maybe a convention center or a stadium or something. The object stopped when, oh, hold on. The object stopped when the witness was on a back road. The witness flashed his headlights, and the object flashed back at the witness with its blue lights. And the witnesses all said that when he flashed the headlights, he was flashing the bright, the high beams on and off, and he was doing it with a particular rhythm. And the object flashed its lights back with the exact same rhythm or timing that the headlights were being flashed. Sound familiar? I mean, it's another
a certain
one.
movie I might have seen.
Yeah. Also, some of these other witness reports we've talked about with the Clarenville sighting, where the object is flashing back, responding to lights.
Yeah.
And that might be their way of communicating. They're like, oh, look, the primitive little monkeys are flashing lights at us. Haha, okay. Hey, give them another flashback. Tell them we see them. We know they're there. All right, yeah, cool. Here you go. Beep, beep, beep. Give them a little flash, The witnesses, when the object got closer, the witnesses saw a string of yellowish lights around the object. And there was a red light on top of the object. This sounds an awful lot like the Clarenville object. Very, very similar. The object seemed to turn around and came towards the car. Its altitude lowered from 500 feet to 200 feet, and it came within 1,000 yards. Once again, there was no noise. It stopped for a few seconds and then moved off towards their left. When it left, it turned off all of its lights except for one bright flashing blue light and one red light. And that's pretty much the sighting in a nutshell. And you could look this one up and look at all the witness statements. There's a little bit more details to it, but that's essentially what happened. And it sounds an awful lot like the Clarenville sighting. It looks like what we have here is a genuine flap, a genuine UFO flap in Canada, probably the States as well, where a whole lot of people are seeing very similar objects. And then there was that one lady and her husband who saw like that crescent-shaped object and the discs moving around. And that one, I wonder if it was some kind of mothership or, what was the deal with that one? It's really weird, really bizarre sighting. I don't know what to make of that one myself. But
yeah, I don't know. But this time period definitely there's a lot of cases. It seems like a little bit of a hot spot. There was a lot going on during this period of time.
Yeah, there's a ton of sightings. We're only scratching the surface of the sightings that I found just in the FOIA document releases. I'm willing to bet that if you dug into newspapers, not just in Canada, but all over the world, look at newspaper reports, and other outlets like maybe books and things like that. If you really dug around, you probably would find quite a lot of interesting sightings. And for me, that tells me that, when you have people in different areas independently reporting the very similar things or the same thing, essentially, that pretty much cements it in my mind that there was some kind of anomalous object moving around and doing weird stuff.
I think so. I completely agree with that because this isn't a coordinated thing. It's not like all these, like you just said or alluded to. These people aren't planning this. Like they're just reporting what they see, and there's so much going on during this period of time. Like something had to have been happening. I don't know. It definitely wasn't Jupiter or Venus, but like it's just like I wonder is like are there like periods in time where if aliens are real, whether they be interdimensional beings or whether they're coming from a different planet, whatever it is, do they have like certain periods where they're like more active than others? Like it seems like it to me. Like it seems like sometimes you just have more active periods, and you have these cases that seem to revolve around each other. In like certain time periods, there's just like more activity going on there, and there must be a reason for it. I couldn't tell you why exactly, but it's noticeable. That like certain time frames, there's just a lot going on, and there must be a reason for it.
Right.
I like I said, I couldn't tell you why, but it's one of those things where you notice like there has to be a reason for it. That there's a lot going on here, and I couldn't tell you why it's going on, but it's going on. I don't know. I'm being very vague about it, but that's because like it's confusing to me. Like some of these like flaps and stuff that we're talking about. Like it's just like what the hell is going on here? Like I wish I knew the answer.
Yeah.
But I don't. All we know is there's all these cases that are going on during certain time periods and stuff, and seems to be like there's just time periods where like things get hot and then it cools down for a little bit and then shit starts happening again, and like you're just like, what the fuck? Like, it's just, there must be a reason, and who knows what it is, whether it be maybe, I don't know. I'm kind of a big fan of the theory that like governments have recovered like UFOs or whatever, and they're like reverse engineering them. And maybe there's periods of time where, they have made breakthroughs or whatever, and they're able to fly certain crafts or, maybe, make the crafts that they have found work or something like that. And they're just testing it out. And part of it could be like, maybe the pilots that are flying these crafts have like a sense of humor, and they're just like, look at what we got, check this out. Nobody's ever going to believe you. You see it, you're looking right at me, but nobody's ever going to believe you. Good luck,
Right.
Good luck telling your story,
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. Like, it's very odd.
Right. And one thing that I find interesting about a lot of these different stories, there are some cases where it seems like somebody read something in the newspaper and then they come out with their own version of that story, and it's pretty much the exact same story. But a lot of these witnesses have similar stories, but they're not identical. You know, some of the details just don't line up, which to me suggests that these are genuine stories. These are not copycat stories. But
I'm sure that there have been people that like for whatever weird reason they wanted attention, so they just made stuff up. I've seen this. Like, I'm a huge fan of like ghost stories and stuff, right?
yeah,
Like, don't get me wrong, I've watched like countless different ghost shows, and we've talked about this before. I've never seen anything that couldn't be faked on any of these shows. I've seen some evidence that is kind of compelling, but it's still, it's possible it could have been faked, and you see this sometimes like in the UFO region too. It's just like, I think some people probably they, for whatever weird reason, this is how they try to get attention, right? Because some people just want attention, right? They're narcissists or whatever, but at the same time, there's a lot of these UFO sightings. I don't think that is at all what's going on. That they are just plain telling you a story that they actually experienced. So yeah, I mean it's hard to know what to believe. I guess is what I'm saying.
right. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff, and there was so many of these stories out there. Even just for the Clarenville event, that I'm pretty sure that these are genuine stories and that this is a real object. And interestingly enough, a lot of the witnesses report movements that do not match our understanding of physics. This thing does not appear to be subject to inertia and things like that. And I'm not sure that we have advanced stuff like that. It doesn't seem like our technology is gone that far. So if it's not ours,
seems like it's operating that object. That object was operating on different parameters. You know what I mean?
Right. This is in 1978. And we had the SR-71, which was pretty cool, but it couldn't do what this thing was doing. We don't have anything that even today, not that I'm aware of. Maybe there's some top secret stuff these days. Who knows? But I doubt it.
There's some pretty cool drones and stuff that even the small ones. You ever seen those I've seen some videos of those drone races and stuff where people have those their headset on, and they have a camera on the drone. They're making super freaking precise movements and going through different barriers and obstacles and stuff. And those drones and they're small, they're not big, but they're extremely agile and very impressive. What some of these guys can do, some of these people can do with these drones. But it's not that though. You know what I mean? It's right. Still not it's a completely different thing, So I don't know. It's whatever that object was. It wasn't something like that, especially back then, because as far as I know, we didn't have drones like that back then.
Yeah, I have seen videos. My favorite is when they synchronize a whole bunch of drones, like hundreds of them, like a cloud of drones, and they do a light show at night. That's badass.
Yeah, some of that stuff is super impressive, man. They'll have a couple hundred drones doing synchronized movements and stuff and making a show for whoever. And it's just amazing that they can have that many moving objects and they don't hit each other and stuff, And they're all synced into the same software and stuff. So they it makes sense that they don't hit each other because they all have safety fails and stuff like that. They have a certain distance that they'll keep, But yeah, I've seen some of those shows. They're pretty impressive, man. It's pretty damn cool. The last one I saw was on Cletus McFarlane, that YouTube channel, and he had some company that specializes in that kind of stuff, and they had some races at his racetrack, and they put on I think it was on July 4th. It was something like that. It was a pro-American, July 4th, celebration of some sort, I think. But it wasn't super complicated, but it was complicated enough where it was impressive. I was like, damn, this is actually kind of cool. And I think they had a couple hundred drones, something like that. And it's damn, dude, it's impressive. It really is impressive, you can have that many moving objects, you know, in conjunction with each other and not like fuck it up.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's really cool. Technology just keeps getting better and better. But all right, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode. I think we pretty much did our final thoughts and everything. So that's all we got for you guys. Next week, I don't know if we'll do an episode or not next week because I'm going to be out of town for most of the week. I'm getting back on Thursday, so I'm not sure if I'll have enough time to prepare. So probably the following week will be our next show. So until next time, can we keep it strange, Agent ETA?
Oh, yeah, baby. Keep that shit strange.